This is Polyamory Weekly, tales from the front of responsible non-monogamy from a pansexual, kink-friendly point of view. A warning for our under-18 listeners. This is an adult-oriented podcast about really lascivious things, like communication and honesty in relationships. If you're under 18 and looking for upfront advice and answers to questions about sex, please visit scarletteen.com.
This is Polyamory Weekly, episode 499 for January 5th, 2017. Coming up on today's show, coming out to your doctor. That's coming up on today's show. Hello and Happy New Year to all of our listeners, new and old. To those who have just discovered the podcast, welcome. To those who've been listening for a week or 10 years, welcome back. And as always, thank you for listening. I am so excited about what 2017 is going to bring. No, not in terms of American politics, still pretty much have my head in the sand about that, but in terms of the podcast and how we can make a difference and how we can expand our reach and get our message to more people so that more people are aware of polyamory and so that we can help more people do polyamory a little bit better and with a little bit more ease of use. That is what I am excited about. And I will tell you why I'm excited, because Lusty Guy has been working overtime to get us booked for events. We are pretty much booked solid for the year right now. So if you want us to speak at an event in 2017, go ahead and contact Lusty Guy at polyweekly.com. And if you ask really nicely, we may see if there's a little bit of spare time we can squeeze in. And really, the limitations are twofold. One is my level of energy. I always want to do all the things, but frankly, these days, between my day job and my crappy immune system, pretty much doing anything other than doing a really great job at the office and then exercising enough to keep up my health and occasionally seeing Lusty Guy and doing the podcast is really hard. So unfortunately, I am at that point in my life. I hate it. I hate it. I have to be realistic about my energy level and my physical capacities. All you youngsters, enjoy it while you fucking can. Enjoy it. And second, because we've pretty much gone through my allotment of vacation days for my new job. So any other speaking gigs I take, if it requires a day off work, means that I'm not getting paid. So that's basically what you're up against if you want to book us to speak. However, we always want to. That's the thing. I always want to speak at as many events as humanly possible. So if you do have an event coming up in 2017, email lustyguy@polyweekly.com and we will do our very, very best to see what we can do. That being said, the first two events of the year are going to be Poly Living Philadelphia in February, which I'm very excited about. I'll be giving one of the keynotes, and Lusty Guy and I are going to be teaching a couple classes. And since we don't get out to the East Coast very often, I'm super excited. I think it's probably been at least 5 years since I spoke at Poly Living Philadelphia. So I'm excited because it's a whole group of people that I don't get to see very often. And then after that, we're going to be doing RelateCon, March 31st to April 2nd in Boise, Idaho. And in case you sort of slow down on your listening in December, they have very graciously agreed to give us a free pass to RelateCon. And all you have to do is go to a Facebook post that we made about 2 weeks ago, and I'll provide a link in the show notes at polyweekly.com. Or if you have the Polyweekly app, then you can find it right there in the show notes in the app. All you have to do is leave a comment saying why it is that you want to go to RelateCon, and we will pick a winner of the free pass from those comments. So I'm trying to think of what could be easier, and I can't think of anything easier than that. So if you are anywhere near Boise, Idaho, and you'd like to go to RelateCon, leave a comment, and we'll be giving away a free pass to that event. How awesome is that? And then in July, I'll be giving the keynote at Poly Dallas Millennium, July 14th to 15th. Link in the show notes at polyweekly.com. So we're pretty heavily booked for the first half of the year. And we do have one or two events in the fall. So I am so excited about how much more I feel we're able to do to promote the word about polyamory this year. I'm just really excited about 2017. And I'll give you a little sneak peek too. We have been working on our poly dating ebook. Now, this ebook is specifically about how to improve your online dating profile. We don't cover all of dating in general, but we do cover basically how to optimize your online profile, focusing primarily on FetLife and OkCupid so that you will get the maximum number of qualified responses. And since both Lusty Guy and I come from marketing backgrounds, we consider all of this a marketing experiment. And so we can give you concrete proven marketing methods for optimizing your online dating profile, which we're really excited about. We're still working on the final edits and we still have the whole ebook publishing process to go through, but the goal is to have that online dating ebook ready by the time we get to Poly Living Philadelphia the first week in February. And you might want to keep an eye out on the Poly Weekly Facebook page because I'm having trouble coming up with the absolute best title. And so I'll probably be running 2 or 3 titles by our fans to see if you have recommendations as to which would be the book that you would want to buy. This week's Poly in the News was a post from the Poly in the News blog from December 25th, and it was just the perfect way to cap off the year, I think. The post is called, Why Poly is So Feminist, the version to give the clueless. I absolutely love it. So the coverage is actually of a post from poly.land, which is your daily Poly blog for navigating life, relationships, and more, by the prolific Paige Turner of the Cleveland Poly and Kink communities. And the title of her post is The Switcheroo When Openers Become Benchwarmers. Now, this is dealing with the concept that many people think of when they first hear of polyamory. They always think, oh, it's the guy's idea and he does it so he can have sex with more women. I love this so much, I'm just going to read you this whole thing. You're poly? He says. I feel kind of bad for you. I raise an eyebrow. Oh? Well, everyone knows that polyamory is just a thing that straight dudes made up so their girlfriends will let them have some extra sex without looking like a creep. I laugh. What? He asked. You're not going to argue? Well, I say, even if that's the case, that's not really the way it plays out. The joke's on any guy who thinks otherwise. He is in for a switcheroo. What do you mean? In the game of poly, straight male is basically the hardest setting you can play on. It's kind of the opposite of normal privilege patterns, I say. So, the extra sex? It takes some doing, I say. And meanwhile, they're likely going to see their female partner overwhelmed with takers and rejecting offers. Oh shit, he says. Just like monogamous online dating. Exactly, except he's going to be sitting alone while she's out on the town. Huh, he says. Never thought about that. Well, what about evening the odds? How? I ask. Well, what if you can only date people together as a couple, a package deal? Yes, I say. Unicorn hunters. That's even harder in some ways. Unicorn what? A unicorn is a bi woman who will date both halves of a couple, I explain. Oh, yeah, he says, that's what I'm talking about. Living the dream. That sounds perfect. What's so hard about that? ... Explanation of why unicorn hunting is not the most productive use of your time and doesn't end up the way you think it's going to. Wow, he says, so poly women really do have a lot of power. I nod. Polyamory is a matriarchy. It's a fantastic article, and Alan does a great job of covering it. So if you've ever had anybody give you this response and they're willing to find out more about your lifestyle, send them this link. And next up, we have a delightful segment with Co, our sex-positive educator for the 20th century, about coming out to your doctor and talking to your doctor about your poly lifestyle and especially about STIs. And I'm very pleased to have back in the studio with us Co-Creation. Welcome.
Thank you, Minx. It's lovely to be here.
Would you care to introduce yourself to our new listeners who might not yet know how absolutely fabulous you are?
Absolutely. My name is Co-Creation. I am the second generation sex educator for the 21st century, and I am Minx's perspective on millennialness and some solo poly stuff.
They're the young blood.
Yes, indeed.
We got old fogey sitting on the left, young blood sitting on the right.
Right. And together we help give you insight and things to take forward with you in your poly life.
And for those who are new also, you say second generation because your parents were in fact polyamorous.
Yep,
and
indeed.
you grew up in a poly household.
I did, my whole life. It was a really raucous and beautiful holidays that we just had, in fact.
I bet it was. I'm a little jealous. It would be fun to be a fly on that wall.
Yeah, well, if you ever want to come over at some point, I'll let my moms know.
I totally should. I haven't been over to your home or your childhood home in a long time. I think I did in the first year or two when I was in Seattle, and after that, not so much.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
I don't know. Well.
At any rate, now that we're done with our social planning,
Yes.
you brought to me this topic, which I think is so important and feel like we can't just talk about enough, which is being polyamorous when it relates to your health and conversations with your doctor and your level of testing for STIs.
Absolutely. One of my favorite topics.
Yeah.
And specifically, what intrigued me about this topic is whenever I get tested every 4 to 6 months. And whenever I go in to see a doctor, I primarily use clinics that are associated with public health. So I'm seeing different people all the time. Being as much of a sex geek, sex positive, slut that I am, I feel like I need to come out about my knowledge base to the various practitioners that I'm seeing. And I've gotten all sorts of reactions. I've gotten we both feel really awkward about this. I've gotten the folks who are totally chill. I've gotten the folks who can't look me in the eye, and I always use different tactics depending on how the conversation goes, but I feel that it's really important and I'm really proud of that identity. So I want them to know that I know what I'm talking about. I know why I'm asking for the things I'm asking for. I know the risks involved with my sexual behavior, and I need them to have a certain amount of knowledge so that if they're serving other people who maybe don't feel like they can be as vocal as I know I can, then I can provide that conversation for this practitioner so that they can have that knowledge in the future.
You said that you have some tactics that work for you. What is your most successful tactic in coming out to your doctor?
Mm-hmm. So my most successful tactic is maintaining an understanding of what I'm there for, right? So instead of talking about the level of relationship with each partner that I have and the situation we're currently in and those sorts of things, I kind of keep it to brass tacks. So I let them know I have sex with people who identify as male, female, and transgendered. I use condoms for penetrative sex, and I don't tend to use barriers for oral sex unless my partner asks for that, right? So I take as much of the sort of personal out of it, because what the doctor is focused on is numbers and is facts and is how those things are relating to my health. And for me, it actually has been powerful so that I'm not trying to explain my emotional lifestyle and justify that, which for me can be very emotional. What I'm trying to explain is the decisions that I have made and I choose not to make.
Right. And I find that most doctors, they're always pressed for time, even if they spend a lot of time with you. Most of the time, a doctor's appointment is limited to 10 or 15 minutes, although I have had doctors take, 30 minutes, or sometimes they'll even give you the luxury of an hour for a first appointment, but probably not at a public health clinic. But I've been dealing with doctors since I was 14, having had a chronic disorder diagnosed at that time.
Yeah.
So over the years, I feel like I've kind of come to understand what it is that doctors want to know.
Mm-hmm.
So what they want to know, especially in the area of sexual health, is exactly what you said. They want to know the behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
I actually once had this amazing gynecologist at Planned Parenthood who would ask everyone, do you have sex with men, women, or both?
Yeah.
And I love it. There's no assumption that everybody is heterosexual. There's no, it's not asking about the identity, as you say. It's not, do you identify as this? It's, I just want to know the action. So, because she may have read something lately about the risks of a particular type of intercourse with a particular population. So they're basically trying to get enough information about your behavior that they can correlate that to the latest report that they've read or the latest initiative or the latest, might even be a study so that they can tell you, oh, there's cases of antibiotic resistant gonorrhea going around that are that if you have a compromised immune system can be deadly and the rest of the time can be really terrible. So you might want to consider using condoms for oral sex, that kind of thing. Or maybe just with your partners that maybe have some other health issues, that kind of thing. As you say, it's less about, I self-identify as trans and bi. Good for you. They don't really care. I mean, maybe some do.
Right.
But they're just trying to get to the facts of the behavior so they can figure out what they can prescribe for you.
Yeah. And a note on that is different places, especially in public health, get different funding streams, right? And so they have different criteria that they're filling out and reporting to other people, which affects the kinds of questions that they ask you sometimes. So if you see, like if you go to multiple clinics and you're like, wait, they asked me this question over here, but not over there, they might have different funding. And so if you feel that there's a certain amount of information that you do want in the conversation, you bring that into the conversation. That's another tactic that has worked for me. And in relation to that, sort of as you say, there might be parts of your identity that you find very important to have in the conversation, even if they're not necessarily facts. And so you express those in a way that you are giving your doctor the opportunity to play off of, right? So if you talk about, let's say so here's one. Like I refer to my genitals in a certain fashion, right? Or I'll refer to having, vulva sex, right? So they know they're hearing like, oh, this person just mentioned the word vulva and, oh, this person is having sex with other vulvas, but they're noting that how I'm speaking about my sex, how I'm speaking about anatomy, how I'm speaking about health, right? So it gives them opportunity to cue off of me. And then if they don't cue off of what I'm saying, that is an indicator for me to be like, oh, you are not entirely, maybe you're not comfortable with this sort of terminology, you're not aware of it. It gives me a lot more information about how they're communicating with me.
Exactly. Now, one of the things, the title of our segment today is, should you come out to your doctor or not? And every year I do this wonderful event at the Bastyr Center, or the Bastyr University here in Seattle, which is all homeopathic, right? And they do something called a living library where I am the book about polyamory. So I, as the human book, speak about poly. And of course, they're all medical professionals. And so they're trying to figure out, okay, if I have clientele that fits into this category of polyamory, what do I need to know? Because most of them are like looking at me all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed going, we don't even know what to ask. Like, we don't know what to listen for. How do we get someone to be comfortable enough to tell us that they're polyamorous? And what I always tell them is, if you're just doing acupuncture for their back or something, they're probably not going to tell you because frankly, it's not relevant. The places where it is relevant tends to be in the areas of things that involve the genitals, right? So if you're a gynecologist or you're dealing with sexual health or, something related to sexuality, that's where it's going to be relevant. And that's where you can make it easy for somebody by asking, instead of saying, are you married or are you having sex? You can ask something like, what is your relationship structure?
Yes.
right? Make it more open-ended.
Yes.
And cues like that let poly people know that it's okay to say, I'm polyamorous. Or you can ask, not just are you sexually active, but how many people are you sexually active with and for how long? The doctor being courageous enough to proactively ask that question is wonderful. However, I do understand that most most medical practitioners do not go through this type of training and don't have the benefit of being at that human library event. So the question is, do you come out to your doctor? And I have to admit, personally, most of the time I see my rheumatologist. And I have come out, most of my rheumatologists I eventually come out to, but it's when it's relevant. It's not that I'm ashamed, it's just that it's not relevant.
Right.
However, because it is an autoimmune disorder, and that therefore means that, for example, that threatening strain of antibiotic-resistant gonorrhea that's hit the United States is relevant to me. Most people don't need to worry about it, but that would kill me.
Right.
Unintentionally.
Right.
So this is something that needs to be of concern, right? So STIs hit me a lot harder than everybody else, right? Somebody else who maybe just gets something itchy and red for a bit and then it goes away, I end up in the hospital, near death. So
We don't want that.
Deal. It's not the best experience. I've done it a couple of times. Want to avoid that in the future.
Yeah.
So my answer to the question, and I would love to hear yours, Co, is, do you come out to your doctor? My answer is when it's relevant. Your OBGYN? Yeah, probably. That person, especially the person that you're going to for your STI testing, you do want to come out to in a non-emotional and unashamed way.
Yeah. You kind of took the words out of my mouth. And so I'm like thinking of what else to say. And what's coming up is, with relevance, like sort of ask these questions of yourself. Are you safe? Do you feel safe in this, telling this person? And then is it relevant, right? We sort of covered that. And then also, what is the purpose of the information? Do you feel safe enough? That's sort of the cueing that we talked about, cueing from your doctor and then taking some of that emotionality out of it so you can come to the information with a really level head. And then with relevance, so like, is this the moment, and is this the practitioner that it would be most relevant for? And then what pieces of information are you giving and why, right? So like, me being such a nerd, I can go on and on and on and on and on, right? And like totally overload my doctor with information when I'm talking about how many people I'm with, right? I can give all of their gender identities and all of this and that because I think it's informative, right? And so it's still sort of figuring out like, why am I giving this information? Am I looking to be an advocate right now? Am I looking to be, am I just trying to show my chops, my sex positive chops, right? I know the things too. Right? So figuring out where you're coming from with the information that you're giving out as well.
Right. Well, and what most doctors really need, I mean, some of them will be, very happy for you that you are fully aware. That's fantastic. I think it's also important to think about what is the information that the doctor needs to make a diagnosis or to give you advice.
Right.
And if you don't know, I'm a big advocate of asking, saying, look, I am not traditional sexually. You can just start out with that. I'm not traditional sexually.
Yeah.
I'm happy to give you as much information as you need, but you tell me what you need to know. Most of the time, at least in terms of sexuality, what they're going to want to know is how many partners, right? And what the gender or style of the sex is. Like, is it penetrative? When we say penetrative, what do we mean? Are you using barriers? And then they might need to know something about frequency, but probably not unless you're actually, unless you have voiced a concern. And the other thing is there any pain or symptoms associated with it?
Yeah.
They basically want to know, do you have a rash? Do you have pain? Are you using protection? What does protection mean to you?
Yeah.
And, are you religious about it? Or is it just, we don't have a condom this time. Don't worry about it. That kind of thing. I am reminded of a very interesting session given by Megan Andalou at Catalyst Con many, many years ago. And she was, counseling someone about sexuality, and the woman came to her and said, well, it always hurts when I masturbate. And she's like, okay, all right. So, where does it hurt? Is it on the outside or on the inside? And show diagrams, whatever. And after an extremely long and excruciating conversation, it finally came out what the woman was using to masturbate with.
Huh.
She was taking 3 pine cones and inserting them in her vagina, and that is how she masturbated. So this is information that your doctor needs to know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
They don't really care if you love the pine cone or how often you see the pine cone or if the pine cone and you're in a committed relationship.
Right.
What they want to know is the what and the how. They don't care about the why.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And
right.
Yes, by the way, I had that same reaction. Like, wow, where on earth did your mother tell you? Like, where did you come up with pine cones? But
yeah,
apparently some people think it's like toys are bad, manufactured toys are bad, and natural things are good.
Yeah.
So who knows? Anyway. But yes, basically your doctor needs to know if you are masturbating with pine cones.
Right.
Right? Or if the person or the vulva or the penis
or the anus.
Or anus or whatever it is that you are masturbating or penetrating with has any type of unusual symptoms, right? And they need to know the type of barrier that you're using.
Yeah.
And any concerns that you might have.
Right.
And as for like why or how often or whether you're not gay but have sex with men,
right.
Most of them aren't going to care.
Yep.
And if they do, just find another doctor.
Yes.
I don't want to be flip, but seriously, if you're not comfortable telling your doctor things like, when I masturbate with a pine cone, it hurts,
right.
Then you need to find another doctor because your doctor cannot help you without this information. So if you are afraid or don't feel safe, I would highly encourage you to see if there's any way, and I know it's not as easy as I make it sound, but I would encourage you to find another doctor because if you can't give this information, then your doctor cannot help you.
Right. And that's something where I will advocate for public health. Even if you have insurance, most clinics, public health clinics, will take insurance, and they do have some more of that specificity, and they have a lot of different physicians that you can see. That's one of the reasons that I've used public health clinics for so long.
And I find they tend to be a lot less judgmental because they've seen it all.
Yes.
Right? They've seen every weird bump and scratch and rash and infection. And they just, they wouldn't be working in public health if they were super judgmental about it. Not entirely true. Don't write me with all the stories of bad public health officials. But in general, I have found that when I went to public health clinics, they want people not to come back. Right. So they want to make sure that you have the protection and the information that you need to, prevent this from happening the next time.
Right.
Yeah.
So now, just for a little bit of balance, let's talk about like when you do actually have to fight for what you need. Because that is another place where I have found it's really important for me to come out. One of the places that I find this very commonly is I do get tested frequently, every 4 to 6 months. And if I have my druthers, I get an HSV1 and 2 test every single time, a blood test every time. I've come up HSV1 reactive for over a year, and I still want that test. I want it for at least 2 years just to make sure, because HSV tests are complicated. And I have to fight for it every single time. And doctors will use things such as, oh, it's expensive. Oh, it's not reliable. Oh, you're coming up reactive for HSV1 anyway, so we shouldn't do it, or there's no reason to. And those are times when I have to come out and say, hey, I'm high risk. I need this.
Yes, and please do, if you're being tested for HSV, also known as herpes, please do make sure that you're getting a blood test.
Yes.
And not a urine test, which are not very effective. And the blood tests aren't great. HSV is it is a very, very sneaky virus. And I totally understand why doctors don't want to do the test. Most of the doctors I talk to are like, dude, everybody has it. Little kids have it. Almost everybody has it. By the time you're 60 or 70, everybody's fucking got it. So it doesn't really matter because for most people, it's not life-threatening. So, yeah, you may have to fight for that, but just be polite and firm.
Yeah.
Right? If you are immunosuppressed, like myself, it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Right? So it's good to know. And also, in particular, if you are If you want to make sure not to pass it on to a partner, maybe you're okay and you're a carrier, but you've never had symptoms,
Yep.
but you want to know, is it active? Do I need to consider taking the suppressive therapy so that I don't give it to my partner who maybe is high risk, even if I'm not?
Mm-hmm.
So please be specific. It is not enough to go in and say, I want to get tested for everything.
Right.
Yeah. So everything, much like sex, means different things to different people.
Very true.
Yeah. So if you want to be tested for HSV herpes, then please be insistent and make sure it's a blood test.
Mm-hmm.
You might get the same thing with HPV,
Yes.
men in particular, because HPV, human papillomavirus, is so very endemic.
Mm-hmm.
For most people, it doesn't propose a risk. However, there are a few strains that do cause cervical cancer. There are a few strains that cause genital warts. And there are a few strains that are dangerous if you are otherwise compromised.
Yeah.
A lot of times doctors don't want to test men because the test is so unreliable. It's hard to say if you're not active at the moment, the test can give a false negative. And so you may encounter some resistance if it is important to you and you have a good reason. Have the conversation with your doctor, not just to say, yes, I want this test, but to say, ask, why is it that you don't think I should do the test?
Mm-hmm.
Let me give you my reasons and let's talk about this. Another thing I've noticed, perhaps you've noticed it as well, doctors don't like it when people think they know more from Wikipedia than the doctor does from their medical degrees, which, you know what, props out to the doctors. Right? You probably do know a little bit more than I can find on Wikipedia.
Yes.
Maybe not about everything. It may be entirely possible that I know more about STI transmission than you do because you don't deal with it every day.
Right.
My rheumatologist, for example, right?
Right.
But person at the public health clinic probably does know more than I do.
Yeah.
So when you are insistent, please also be respectful.
Mm-hmm.
This person did go to school, has a very challenging schedule, deals with people not as smart as you all the time.
Right.
So I would encourage you to be brave enough to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think just one last, I would kick myself if I didn't say this. One of the verbal things that I always make sure to model for the practitioner, whether they have, and it is not an insult to their training, but it is something I really do encourage them to keep in the practice of. And I'll even say that out loud sometimes is, reactive and non-reactive.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Versus clean, or what I guess the other one is dirty.
Dirty, or negative and positive.
Yeah.
Even, right? And those are what the tests say on them. When you get your results back, it'll say you are negative for gonorrhea. But how the test actually works is it is testing for the antibodies of whatever infection it's searching for. And so it'll say this test was non-reactive. It did not react to something, any of the antibodies. If it did react to the antibodies, that's actually what's happening. So it is scientifically more accurate. And it doesn't carry any of these very binary connotations of like negativity or dirtiness or cleanliness or positivity. Like those are not synonymous and they are not what defines you.
Exactly. And I know a lot of sex positive educators are trying to get rid of the word clean as a test response. Like, oh, I tested clean. And I'm like, so the 80% of the population that is positive for HSV or HPV is now dirty? Mm-hmm. Well, that's kind of judgy for a scientific test. Right. So I do like reactive and non-reactive. I agree with your approach of modeling. Like you want to model the behavior you want to see, model the language you want to see.
Yeah. And I like specifically what you said about, be respectful.
Yeah.
Right? So when I refer to myself, I use the term non-reactive. So that's how I'm going to speak to you today.
Yes.
That's a quote that I use with my practitioners all the time. It's also something that to keep in the habit, I model when I'm giving my safer sex talk to a potential partner.
Exactly.
Right. And I think that's the other side of this is like when you do have awareness around what you're tested for, you can give much more accurate information to a person that you want to be sexual with. And that builds that trust, brings in ease. And then you know what to listen for from someone as well. Or read if you're reading their results in a printed form.
Exactly. Well, I hope this conversation has made it a little easier for people to consider talking to their doctor and to figure out what information their doctor needs to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very cool. Thanks for taking this on.
Always love talking about STIs. That probably sounds weird.
No, just geeky.
Just there's so much negativity and stigma and fear. I'm like, let's get rid of the fucking fear.
Yes.
Let's do that. There's so many things we should be afraid of. Donald Trump comes to mind. Or, as I have called him, thank you to my friends on Facebook for giving this wonderful moniker, Cheeto Face McTwitterthumbs.
Cheeto Face McTwitterthumbs.
Yeah, so there are things we should be afraid of. Our civil liberties and rights taken away. Talking to your doctor or being afraid of, very, very, very common STIs. Be aware, but let's get the fear to a minimum.
Yeah, and I think bouncing off of that, I want to leave us with a quote that self-care is actually an act of political warfare.
Yes.
So you doing this for yourself will help your civil liberties in the long run.
Yes, indeed. Well, thanks again for joining us today, Co. I know it's so hard to get together because you don't live in the same city anymore.
No, so it's always good to see your face.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Cool. We'll see you next time.
And thanks again to Co for joining us. You can find her online at www.cocreation.com and on social media at CoCreate. It's time for your Happy Poly Moment of the Week, brought to you by Fubbly Polyamorists everywhere. Today's Happy Poly Moment comes to us from Jay, who says, "My parents are pretty liberal, but they were still very surprised when I came out to them as poly about 18 months ago. They were hesitantly supportive, but had the classic worry, well, your girlfriend gets all the benefits of the relationship and you don't." As a little aside, this is the way my friends responded to my coming out as poly, but the other way around. Your friends are always worried that everybody else, that your partner is going to get the benefits of poly, but you are going to be nothing but hurt. He continues, "I used Dan Savage's advice of give your parents a year to get over it, then start withholding your presents. Luckily, they only needed about 9 months. Yay! My parents usually host family holiday gatherings at their house, and I was a little nervous going into October, but they were totally planning on having my girlfriend and her family, husband and 2 kids, up for both Thanksgiving and Christmas. So I wound up with a really happy Christmas Day. I was able to spend it with most of the family I care about, my girlfriend, her husband, their 2 kids, and my parents. My parents commented later on how wonderful it was to have everyone there, how much fun they had with the kids, and how much they enjoyed finally meeting my girlfriend's husband." Well, Jay, thank you so much for sharing that. Especially at this time of year, it can be really difficult when biological family clashes with family of choice, and that was the absolute perfect happy poly moment to give people like me a little bit of hope that maybe one day I'll be able to visit my biological family again. And we had all kinds of fantastic donations this month. Thanks to Jason and Doug and Zoya for your generous donations. Doug in particular. Yes, thank you. We did 69 the way I like it. Thank you. For those who aren't familiar, we started a while ago. I don't remember how exactly it came about, but if somebody gives $69, then in honor of that donation, Lusty Guy and I will do 69. And if you give $96, then we will do 69 the way I do not prefer it, which is with me on top. So $69, we do 69 with me on bottom. 96, we do 69 with me on top. Kind of depends on how much of a sadist you are, like how much you donate for that. Well, as always, I want to thank everybody for their donations, whether that donation be financial, by calling in a comment or writing in a question, or simply by listening and sharing Poly Weekly with your friends, by writing a review on iTunes, which helps us with our discoverability. We have kept this resource free for 499 episodes. And yes, I do have an awesome surprise for you for episode 500, so stay tuned. And our goal is to help people navigate their introduction to polyamory and to help have their poly relationships be happier, healthier, and free of as much drama as humanly possible. So any type of donation, whether it be by telling a friend or financial, we really, really appreciate. If you have questions, comments, or feedback, polyweekly@gmail.com. Call 802-505-POLY, or you can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/polyweekly, on Twitter @polyweekly, or me directly @cunningminx, and on social media all over the place. With that, I hope your 2017 is as bright and shining and promising and full of happiness and success and wealth of all kinds as is humanly possible. Thanks for listening. And remember, it's not all about the sex.